Director. Thank you all so much for coming here today. It's our first forum on engineering and infrastructure. I think by looking at the room, we can tell it's a very popular topic and one that we've been waiting for, so we're really excited. We are happy to be able to bring this forum to you and in Ashland, which is a nice commute for everyone. And before we get to the heart of today's forum, I want to begin with something that we do at all of our meetings for Safe Routes to School, which is a safety moment. So, what just happened this week? Daylight savings. So daylight savings ended this past Sunday, and while it's great that we all gained an extra hour of sleep, there's definitely an increase in safety-related incidents during the days and weeks that follow. Much of this is related to the increase in darkness around the time of the evening commute, and many times drivers and pedestrians aren't yet acquainted with the decreased visibility. So just want to keep that in mind, that it's very important that over the next few weeks that we exercise a lot more caution, slow down when we're on the roads, make sure we look out for pedestrians, and if we are a pedestrian or a cyclist, make sure we're wearing lighter colors and using reflective gear to make sure that we're more visible to everyone. Also part of our safety, we do like to point out the emergency exits. So there is one in the back right there. We have one right over here, and then through the door that you came in. Also, restrooms. I think you all saw them as you came in. So at any time, please get up for the facilities. And as a MassDOT policy, we need to ask, who is CPR certified in this room? Awesome. We should be in really great hands. Okay, and do I have a volunteer to dial 911 in case there's an emergency? Thank you, Ms. Aaron. And so I want to talk about the fact we do have a few new faces on the Safe Routes to School team. So I think it would be nice if you introduce your team if you don't already know who your outreach coordinators are. So you will be getting to know them in the next couple weeks and months. So we'll start with Emily. Emily, stand up. Emily handles the southern part of Massachusetts and the Cape and Islands. Judy Crocker. Judy handles the North Shore area. Vivian Ortiz is handling the Boston area all the way down to Hingham. Rachel O'Donnell is, we're calling it Metro West, out to Framingham. And I think Ashland, is Ashland part of that? I think so. I just did her map the other day. And then Sam Gold is east of Rachel and west of Vivian, so she's Metro West. So think Newton and Brookline. Peter Casisto is Western Mass and Springfield. Peter, thank you. And also, we do have another opening. We're growing our team. We're adding another coordinator. So we have a new position for somebody if they're located in the Pioneer Valley area. That would be great. That will take folks from all over the state. And to help us with the forum today, we do have several special guest speakers that provide a wide array of knowledge and experience. Okay. So Pat Kelsey over here, who's our outreach supervisor, will be going over evaluation tools that are helpful to identify the engineering and infrastructure needs. Jeff Brubaker, Jeff right here from Tool Design Group, is a senior planner, and he's going to be going over Planning 101. Sergeant Ed Berman, who popped in here for a second, he's at the Ashland Police Department. He's going to be joining us a little bit later today to give us a real-world example of identifying an infrastructure need and then actually making it happen with a crosswalk across the street. And then finally, Cassandra Bly in the back there from MassDOT will be discussing various infrastructure funding sources available to communities and launching soon to launch the new process for Safe Routes to School infrastructure funding. Now I'd like to welcome up our first speaker, Safe Routes to School Outreach Supervisor, Pat Kelsey.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming again. As Diane mentioned, my name is Pat Kelsey. I am the Outreach Supervisor for Safe Routes to School, Massachusetts. I oversee all the outreach coordinators. Please think of me as a duplicate of your outreach coordinator. Anything that you would reach out to them for, you can also reach out to me for. As Diane mentioned, we are hiring. So again, Pioneer Valley folks, please keep viable candidates in mind for your territory. I'm going to talk today about quick overview of the Safe Routes to School program. I know a lot of you are very familiar with it, but we're going to talk a little bit about one of our other E's, which is evaluation and the tools we use to evaluate and identify infrastructure So our 6 E's, equity, education, enforcement, encouragement, engineering, and evaluation. If you're at all familiar with the Safer to School program, you've seen many presentations about these E's. We're not going to go super in depth on any of these except for evaluation. Evaluation goes hand in hand with engineering. You can't really do much engineering without previous evaluation. We kind of think measure twice and cut once. So engineering on its own does a great job, but it doesn't do the job entirely by itself. In a study from the National Center for Safe Routes to School, they witnessed an 18% increase in walking and biking with just infrastructure implementation. With just the other 5 E's, education, enforcement, and all those other E's, they saw a 25% increase. And with the combination, they saw a 31% increase. So this actually surprises a lot of people. A lot of people think, engineering or bust, and that's the most important E. I'm here to convince you that it really can't do the job on its own, and the working together with all the other aspects of our program is incredibly important. So one of the tools that we use for evaluation is our parent survey. The parent survey can go home as a backpack flyer. It's a 3-minute survey, just a couple of questions. It asks where you live and what your mode is in the morning and afternoon. We don't actually ask for your street address for privacy reasons, so we try to make everyone very comfortable filling it out, and it's available in 9 languages. So no matter what language the parents speak or the guardians, they're able to participate in that. You can also fill it out online. That's a quick shot of the home page where if parents are more comfortable or more responsive via email, they can go ahead and just click and fill out those same questions online. This website will produce a report for the school. It will produce a map that shows half-mile and mile walk sheds, and it also have plotted on that map everyone's mode color-coded. So you can see there's a nice cluster of walkers here, there's a cluster of people who drive here, and you can make decisions on routes based on those maps. The student travel tallies are the other way that we kind of collect the same data. Believe it or not, surveying students directly is actually sometimes more reliable than surveying parents. Parents get a lot of things coming home in the backpacks, and they tend to have kind of limited bandwidth and attention. The travel tally is administered in class by a teacher, and they literally just ask for hands to be raised by mode. They say, how many of you walked, how many of you got dropped off, how many of you took the bus, and they fill out this form themselves. This is a little bit more real time, but it doesn't give us quite the same reporting that the online survey does. The online survey will give us a very robust report, show your school against standards, and we give a little bit of an incentive for the parents. We actually give a $250 gift card if more than 50% of the school participates, and we get really good data, and we incentivize the school. And we encourage that $250 be spent on Safe Routes to School projects of some sort, or some sort of active transportation initiative within the school. The active transportation assessment, or walk audits or walk assessments that we conduct, you typically have the following stakeholders in attendance. What we try to look at on the walk assessments is a little bit, not only the hard infrastructure, deficits and opportunities within the infrastructure, good and bad routes. We try to look at some of the soft, non-engineering aspects of it too. One of the more common things that is not perceptible, say on a Google map, is overgrown brush, enforcement issues around removal of snow, scary dogs, things like that. Just don't show up unless you go and ground truth this. You won't know. And when you're on the walk assessment, you really want to keep your design user in mind, which is children. Sight lines change for kids. Things that are intimidating for kids are different from things that are intimidating for adults. You want to imagine that you actually are a child when you do this. And that's what we try to keep in mind when we're leading walk. So I was lucky enough to participate at the Bridge Street School in Northampton. They have a very robust walking school bus program. I was out with police officers, planners, principals, parents, and teachers, and all the stakeholders. We walked a few different routes. There's a few different considerations nearby, including a highway, overpass, but we were able to identify on the walk, enforcement areas, all the issues that I was just mentioning, because the right stakeholders were on the walk. They knew who lived where, they knew where kids came from, and they knew the traffic enforcement issues around the school at pickup and drop off. And that is one other thing that we are currently developing is a really robust arrival dismissal assessment. And I shouldn't have said pick up and drop off. I should say arrival dismissal. Pick up and drop off implies a car, which we want to de-emphasize. So what we look at arrival and dismissal, again, is not necessarily the hard infrastructure. We want to look at behaviors. Most of the folks who are looking at the school design are those who are like building or planning the school. They look a lot at the built environment and the actual engineering and physical design of it. We want to look at how those engineering things are actually working in real life. We'll look for violations. We'll look for mode splits. What we find with arrival dismissal assessments is that the more people present, the better. Ideally, you have a handful of people who all have one job. They all have one thing to look at. If you try to do an arrival dismissal yourself, I don't know if any of you have ever stood on the ground when a school is getting out, but it's chaos. So if you have just one thing that you want to look at, your arrival dismissal assessment is going to be a lot more effective as opposed to if you try to see everything all at once, you'll be overwhelmed. So we'll be rolling out a really robust arrival dismissal process and reporting procedure in the next year. So these are the sorts of things we look for. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this picture? Yell it right out. Right? So these are the sort of low-hanging fruit. You can easily see what's wrong with this. What about this one? Thoughts? Passing a school bus. We are routinely stunned at the violations we see. Parking in a sidewalk or parking in a crosswalk, often considered just kind of the cost of doing business or a necessary evil. We see some truly negligent behaviors at arrival and dismissal. It seems to be a situation where the rules don't seem to apply much. So we do want to work on education after we do this. What about this one? Exactly, super faded signs. I know that these signs recently had an upgrade in the materials that they're required to use, the no idling signs. That should be a dark blue and very visible. But what we have out there now are a lot of signs that are not very legible. What do we see here? Blocking the box, right? So unless you go at the right times, this might look like a perfectly acceptable crosswalk, right? And from an engineering perspective, this is about as good as it gets. You've got a crosswalk, you've got ADA, you've got everything as it should be, but you really do want to take a look at how the vehicles and the pedestrians and the bicycles and everyone kind of interact with these things. Sorry?
It's perfect. Why?
The crosswalk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always room for improvement.
Sure, exactly, yeah. Our job is to never be satisfied really with arrival dismissal. Sure, if I can figure out how to go back. This one?
Yep.
There you go.
But what you're actually seeing right now, the gray car in the middle, is actually the car traffic on that arterial road. All the other cars carry traffic through on the arterial road, turning them into the parking lot. Blocking the bus that's trying to enter into the bus entrance, which is where the crosswalk is right there. So, I think, as we say, we like to tell parents they're not in traffic, they are in traffic.
Right. And all the other E's that we have, all the other education enforcement, all the solutions to these, I know this is kind of a frustrating presentation to watch and be like, yeah, those are all problems. What do we do? We're just going to talk about evaluation before we talk about engineering, just to kind of marry those two concepts in your mind. But yeah, there are solutions for all of these that live within the other E's within our program. Oops, am I going backwards? Yes. So we try to offer schools tools that they can implement right away. A lot of schools feel relatively powerless to affect the built environment around them sometimes. So we try to give them kind of procedural or process updates that they can implement right then and there. And again, those often live within the other E's within our program, but it kind of empowers them to kind of take charge of the situation in ways that they really can do in the short term, within their students' tenures. And that's an important thing to do. We can't always say like, oh, an engineering project will arrive someday. We need to kind of empower them to take action on it. And that is the end of my presentation. I'll bring up Jeff Brubaker next from Tool Design Group.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Good. I'd now like to welcome Jeff Brubaker. Jeff is a senior planner with Tool Design Group. He joined Tool with a decade of experience with multimodal transportation planning and project management in local and regional government. Aside from Safe to School, Jeff has knowledge and experience regarding greenways, project management, project prioritization, federal and state funding programs, and public engagement. Today, Jeff is here to talk with us specifically about what the general planning process looks like when it comes to infrastructure improvements. Welcome, Jeff.
All right, so how many folks here are with municipal government? All right, and how many with an NPO or regional government? Great, and then how many are advocates or citizens or work for nonprofit? Great, so we've got a good mix for you. Government staff, you might hear some things in this presentation that are very familiar, but I hope you learned something. And for the advocates and the nonprofit staff, I hope you get a better idea of maybe there's a great project out there that's in process, and you're wondering why it's taking so long. There are so many steps to the project development process, so I hope to make that more clear. Right. See if I can get the right. Oops.
Just scroll.
I think so.
Okay.
There we go. All right, so my presentation is going to cover MassDOT's 2006 Project Development and Design Guide. When does the MassDOT process apply? What's new since 2006 when the guide was published? And then what are the steps to developing a project? So in a nutshell, what are the steps from getting a project from an idea to on the ground? And I think this is really important because a lot of these projects are really good projects, especially Safe Routes to School projects. You know, where once the project's on the ground, that could be transformative for allowing kids to walk and bike to school when they didn't have any safe or convenient option before. So from my perspective and the attitude I took to my work now and when I was in the public sector was, if these are great projects, let's get them on the ground as quick as possible, you know, because a good project is even better when it's delivered sooner rather than later. Sure, yeah. So the 2006 Project Development Design Guide was published by MassDOT. It doesn't apply to all projects. Cassandra will talk a lot about funding and Safe Routes to School infrastructure applications later. So some of the questions to ask when deciding whether a project would apply to the 2006 Project Development and Design Guide. By the way, how many of you are familiar with that guide? Great, awesome, fair amount. So is MassDOT controlling the infrastructure? So is it something that you want to implement on a state maintained facility? Who is the main project proponent? And who is funding the project? So if the project is in the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, then it probably has federal funding and the guide needs to apply. But there's a lot of local projects that aren't using federal funding that may not need to adhere to the guide. So project stakeholders, there's 6 MassDOT highway districts. Everybody know which district they're in probably. They're obviously an important stakeholder for any project. There's a project review committee. And then let's see those MPO staff here. How many MPO staff are in the room? Great, awesome. 6 or 7. I might call on you guys later. You guys are important stakeholders in a lot of these projects as well. And then there's tons of local stakeholders, obviously elected officials, different municipal departments, facility users, you know, the people we are really building these projects for. neighbors and citizen groups, abutting property owners, different municipal commissions, folks who are engaged in advocacy around improving access for people with disabilities, senior centers, private businesses, obviously, especially in retail areas, local emergency responders. How often does that come up, especially when you're working on projects that have a traffic calming element or a curb-to-curb narrowing element? Utilities, and obviously a potential whole host of different stakeholders who are involved from the environmental and ecological side, depending on where the project is located. Also, if you're building a project in a historic district or a historic area, the Landmark Commission or a Historic District Review Committee might be involved as well. Any major ones that I missed that you'd like to point out here? All right, well, these are the ones that are in the MassDOT guide. So examples of where the funding process does not apply: locally funded projects on locally owned roads, projects funded by Chapter 90, Community Preservation Act funds, and then some of the newer funding programs that MassDOT has implemented. The MassDOT Complete Streets funding program. How many of you, if you're with the local government, have received funding from the Complete Streets funding program? Great. MassWorks infrastructure, and then the Recreational Trails program, which has its own process. So 2006 was a long time ago. It's over 12 years ago, and there's bound to have been some updates to the guide. And I'm going to talk about two major milestones that have happened since the guide was published. One is MassDOT's project intake tool, and the second is some new planning and design resources, some of which you may already be familiar with. So MassDOT's project intake tool, you could have a whole presentation just on how the tool works. I'm only going to go over the kind of the very basic elements of it. How many have used that tool for entering and initiating a project? One. Just one. Okay. All right. So maybe a good introduction then. So it's a GIS-based tool, and the purpose of the tool is to allow project sponsors, which are often local governments, to initiate a project through the MassDOT process. And you can do this online, and you can fill out the forms that are needed to initiate the project initiation form and the project need form online in the same application while you are using geographic information systems or GIS-based tools to look at some of the context of the project that you want to build. So I have an idea for a project. I know where it's located. I can use the tool to initiate the project, but also see some of the potential constraints and opportunities that the project may face. So environmental constraints. Does the project cross railroad lines? Things like that. So it's a really kind of a one-stop shop for initiating a project through the project development, through the MassDOT process. So after that's initiated, MassDOT approves the project and assigns the project number. So I'll come back to map it a little bit, but now I'm just going to go into the general steps for project development. These are going to be very broad. Obviously, there's not time to go into a lot of detail on what each of these steps entails. Every project is different. So feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts on any of these steps or experiences or lessons learned on the projects you've worked on or been involved in. So step one is identifying a problem, need, or opportunity. So just looking at the before and after pictures here, if you look at the red arrow, you can see that this house right here is the same one right here. What are some of the changes that you see in the before and after photos? Signs, crosswalk,
Stop sign, sidewalk.
stop signs, intersection reconfiguration. Yeah, a lot of things. There's even stars. So yeah, you can see that in a photo like the before picture, you can see there's a lot of need out there. You can see that there's already demand. There's people trying to cross the street, including, and these are kids, trying to get to school. So I'm sure you can imagine any number of different street and road contexts in each of your local communities where you can look at it and say, yes, this needs a lot. And the first step of any project is to identify the need, identify the opportunities, and determine the evaluation criteria you're going to use for the project. Develop the project scope. So how is the scope going to address the particular need? It could be speeding. The speed of cars at the intersection is a concern. It could be there's an identified crash cluster at the intersection. So these are examples of project need statements. And the scope really should address those specific needs. And then you submit the project need form and it gets reviewed by MassDOT.
Yeah. No, the whole project of 1 to 3 months.
Just identifying the need, yeah. I wish.
Can you put a dollar amount on that one? Set of changes?
Oh, that's a good question. This is like The Price is Right.
I'm hearing things.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, when a street needs to be resurfaced anyway, if there are no other major changes, the restriping needs to occur anyway. So that's a real low-cost opportunity to add some new pavement marking. Signage is very minimal cost in general. If there's any curb work, new ramps get put in, anything affecting drainage or utilities, that cost really bumps up. But
They narrowed the street. They narrowed the street dramatically.
yeah, so this is a little bit different perspective. So what's that?
It's tough to evaluate it because it's different locations.
No, it's the same location.
It's the same location?
Yeah, that house is the same one.
So they turned it into an intersection.
I would say that's at least $100,000.
Yeah.
Given the current relocation, probably a storm drain.
And there was no sidewalk or curbs before.
There's a curve, there's grass, there's huge
Oops, sorry.
change,
Yep.
much narrower.
Yeah.
So this system here doesn't just apply to the safe route school project, it's for more things too?
Yes. All right. So this is the chart that you see in the project development design guide. I've simplified it up here. Project definition, problem, need, opportunity, goals and objectives, the project constituents or the stakeholders, your outreach plan. That all goes into the project need form. MassDOT has a review and may suggest revisions to that. And then when that's all wrapped up, you proceed with the next steps. So project planning, Pat already talked about some of the planning resources that you can apply to these projects. Walk audits, safe routes to school audits, a school travel plan. You may have already conducted a corridor study that identified some of the different needs in the corridor, and some of those needs might have to do with safe routes to school. It's important early on as possible to involve the local community. How many of you had projects that you thought were sailing along, and then at the end they became contentious? Any stories that people are courageous enough to tell?
We have a whole, we have a legacy project to so
Longfellow Road State Corridor, which we found, all the way through the implementation, there are always little pop-ups and people wanting to change this and that bus stop, driveway, or any of those things we thought were done, public process over, and then still sort of chipping away at it.
And how challenged? So just to repeat the question for the recording and for the folks in the back of the room, it was throughout the course of the project, even after the community, what's your community? Belmont had done a lot of public process. There was more public input saying change this feature or change that feature, it always seems like it's like 11th hour or you can't get to a final state. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot packed into that statement, involve the local community early in the study, but it's really important to have them there at the table, not only reacting to solutions that are put on paper or on a map, but also helping to define those solutions. Because parents, even kids, school principals, neighbors, they have a really good idea of what some of the issues are, especially related to safe routes to school, problem crossings or speeding cars, things like that. So they can be an asset, and they should definitely be involved as early in the process as possible. So more complex projects would entail an alternatives analysis. When you're doing simple maintenance and rehabilitation projects, that's not as much of a concern. But when you're building, new multi-use paths along new alignments, if there's, significant environmental constraints where you want to locate the path, an alternatives analysis is often important. And then the project planning report is part of the MassDOT process, where you just document all of your planning findings. Any questions at this point? So here's another complex table inside the guide. And this just documents, obviously you don't need to read everything, but this just documents different types of projects, different scopes of projects, have different levels of planning rigor as to what you have to do. So if it's any project needs a project need form. If you're doing more minor projects, you might not need to have a full alternatives analysis. You might just have to have a clear and feasible solution with potential minor variants. And then if it's a complex process, you're going to need to have a high level of planning rigor. It takes a lot of time early in the project, but it might save time later because you're trying to put all of the issues on the table right off the bat and work through them at an early stage, because it might be more expensive or time consuming to do that later. So initiating a project, I talked about the project initiation form through MAPIT and MassDOT review and MPO review. These are some screenshots from MAPIT. You can see here, these are different environmental and community context layers. You can see when you're filling out your project initiation form and project. And there's presentations out there on this tool. So I would say talk with your MPO staff if you're a local government. If you're an MPO, you probably know about this tool already. And if not, you can get in touch with one of us to get more information on this. And so this tool is also a screening tool. You can actually draw your project on the map, and then it can pull up where your project intersects with sensitive conditions. So in this case, it is highlighting some of the important conditions of the project site where you want to build your project. So one of the things that it highlights is this project intersects with HSIP clusters, or HSIP pedestrian crash clusters, Highway Safety Improvement Program. So basically what it's saying is that your project is in an area that has a history of crashes. You might want to check that out more, because it might influence your project scope and the safety countermeasures that you include in the project. And then this is just another screenshot of the map. You can see here on the right, you have the form and the online interface. Yeah.
Let's go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
So I see how the tool highlights crash clusters, both pedestrian, automobile, and bicycle. What if you're talking about a more rural neighborhood or in setting where you're not really going to see a high number? Does a tool sort of like, I mean, it's not that you don't need to make changes, it's just you're not going to get crash clusters because you're talking about one a year maybe as opposed to a high. So how does Matthew, like, how do you handle that? Like you're talking about lower volume, but still a significant concern.
That is a great question. That's like a question for like a philosophical presentation on its own. Yeah, even if you don't have a crash cluster, it doesn't mean that the location is safe. If the location is unsafe, it may deter people from using it in the first place. People may not want to walk or bike along there because they perceive it as unsafe. So I think that's just an important thing to note is that there are ways to analyze the background conditions that might contribute to transportation safety risk. We do it a lot at my firm for pedestrian and bicycle safety. We do systemic safety analysis and other things that try and evaluate whether or not there's a crash cluster there. What are some of the factors that may make the location more likely to have crashes of certain types?
Would that require some kind of review process through NPO or if they're looking for state funds?
If you want to identify specific risks for specific crash types, independent of where crash clusters are, the best way to do that is to do a systemic safety analysis. So there are a lot of safety, there are a lot of elements of safety that aren't necessarily picked up by simply co-locating crash clusters, but they are one useful tool. So crash clusters are very useful. It's just that to your point, and to your point, you may have to do an additional targeted analysis of the area you're looking at to identify some of the factors that may increase risk for pedestrians and bicyclists, especially vulnerable users like kids that are trying to get to school, who have different levels of ability to measure gaps and to make decisions as they're crossing the street, and have, of course, more vulnerabilities in the event of a vehicle-pedestrian collision. So you really want to drill into the details, but this provides a good start because if a crash cluster shows up, you're really going to want to take a look at why that might be and what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, from my own experience, our NPO, pretty much any project initiated now is getting a safety audit. Road safety audit is going to identify safety analysis. Even if the project's not initiated, it's an area that is a concern for the community. I would work with your NPO. Our NPO and the local technical systems program will always work with our communities to do a safety analysis, even if it's not a project initiated yet. And there are ways to document the crash column, even if it's not a crash cluster. I know some of my region, we have a lot of areas, so I don't have crash rates. Not a, it's not a crash cluster, it's not getting that number of crashes, but it's because of the low volume and the number of crashes we arrive with, you don't have a crash rate that's well above the average. So there are ways to document it.
Yeah, good point. And for the recording and for the folks in the back of the room, just to kind of summarize that point, road safety audits are another way. Pat talked a little bit about audits, but they're another way to document those potentially risk-inducing factors in an area at the beginning of the project. And I just want to take time now to note that for you local government staff, I work both for a local government and for an NPO. Your NPO staff are assets, they're allies, and they're champions for you. So a lot of questions you might have of how do I get this project started, that's part of what an NPO is for, is to assist you in moving those projects forward. So thank you for bringing that up.
You would add to your list there, an underutilized intersection.
Yeah, so this doesn't necessarily contain the universe of all information that would be relevant to the project.
Right, but things like that, for a community like hers, an underutilized intersection, of course, ought to be flagged.
Yeah, you can document that during this stage. Good point. The gentleman back there, and then
For identifying potential projects, for assessing them, or maybe prioritizing without having to formally submit it as an initiation.
yeah, I see some folks shaking their heads yes. So I'll use their answer. Yeah.
So just to broaden that, so it's not a mass, essentially you're looking at something under local control. This seems like a really good way of gathering all the information that sort of the state knows about the intersection area. Are there any limitations on that? You know,
I don't know enough about the tool to be able to like confidently describe what the limitations might be. But yeah, obviously this wouldn't be the only resource you consult when you're trying to determine the scope and needs for the project. Yeah.
but it seems like one-stop shopping for doing, you know, this sort of processing on stuff to say, hey, show me this area, tell me the problems here.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, it in plan.
It is very useful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was at the moving together conference where they said they're looking for people to ensure that it was updated within that. So they want people to look at it. They're not submitting it, but they can plan there. So,
Yeah. I think you need the username and password. Yeah, go ahead. All right. Well, let's keep going because we've got a few more stages to go. So once the project's been initiated, once you've done the planning, you get into the actual design phase. So you develop the plan specifications and estimate, the PS&E. This is where you develop environmental studies and where you determine what permits are needed. So 401, 404, wetlands permits. You might need a number of different permits from the local community and NEPA documentation. So most small sidewalk and bikeway projects are going to require the lowest level of NEPA documentation, National Environmental Policy Act documentation, which is the categorical exclusion. So won't get into the details there, but it's the least rigorous environmental document you need to fill out for the least impactful project. You need to do a right-of-way analysis to determine how your project might affect the need for right-of-way acquisition and whether there are any easements, who owns the adjacent parcels where you're building the project. So there's a very close relationship between the design, the environmental documentation, the right-of-way, and the public outreach. All of these things affect each other. So I just want to point out here that public hearings are often required for projects, and if they're not, you should do them anyway just to support public outreach. Yeah.
Sorry, can I do a fact check on that?
Sure.
I'm being told by our DPW that once the public hearing is offered, it'll be for minor tweaks, but at that point, the engineering plans are done.
At what point of the design?
I think he said 90%.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, once you're at 90% completion, you don't want to be making any major changes. Hopefully, any public concerns have been talked through public outreach prior to that point.
So then at what point, if we use percent completion, at what point should the first public hearing be offered?
I think as early in the project as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should have public hearings later in the design stage. So I will talk a little bit about environmental documentation and permitting. Not going to go into details on this. Louder? Okay. Okay. Not going to go into any detail, too many more details on this, but the permitting must be completed before the 75% design submittal. So the other major aspect of this is all of the elements that go into actual creation of the plans, specification, and engineer's estimate. Surveying and base maps, cross sections, traffic data and plans, pavement design, the functional design report, and any design exceptions. Design exceptions having to do with where the design deviates from established standards. The engineer's estimate, the cost estimate, needs to be as accurate as possible because when you go out and bid the project, you're going to be comparing the bids to the engineer's estimate. Utilities, obviously early coordination with utilities, especially if there's going to be relocations, and the traffic management plan, and just overall good notification of the public during the design process so they know what's going to be built. So right-of-way acquisitions are a significant source of project delay. Right-of-way needs affect the project design. And like I said, right-of-way and design kind of needs to be synced. So the design determines the amount of right-of-way acquisition that you may need. And that's for not just permanent easements or fee simple purchases, but also temporary construction easements. And right-of-way acquisition needed to tie slopes back to your new project. The Uniform Act, the Federal Uniform Act, there are a lot of ways if your project is federally funded to violate this act. And if you do, your federal funds could be rescinded. So if your project is federally funded, you need to make sure that you're coordinating very closely with MassDOT and fulfilling all the needs of the Uniform Act. So programming, who are my MPO staff here? This is just the process of actually obtaining the funding once you've done the design to move towards the construction phase. Federally funded projects get included in those transportation improvement programs, but there's a lot of projects that don't use federal funding. So, like I said, projects get into the transportation improvement program. There's a number of different potential federal funding sources, including the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, Transportation Alternative Set Aside, Congestion Management and Air Quality, CMAQ program. Your MPO will know if you are receiving CMAQ funds. Highway Safety Improvement Plan, that should say Highway Safety Improvement Program. And then some potential other funding sources you can be creative with, bridge funding and FTA, Federal Transit Administration funding, that you may be able to apply to access to transit. So the final three stages, I'm just going to wrap up very quickly, very important. Once your design is finished, you've got the 100% plan specification estimate signed and sealed, you can, and you've got the funding secured, you can take the project out to bid. So this is another potential source of project delay. If there's anything unclear about the plans or specifications or special provisions, you may get questions coming in from potential bidders. You may have to issue addendums and push the bid opening back. If your engineer's estimate is not very accurate, you're going to get you might get a situation where all of the bids are way high compared to the engineer's estimate, and you have to reject bids, go back and do a rebidding. So this is one source of project delay. How many of you have experienced that during the bidding stage of a project? Yeah. So during construction, obviously quality is the most important thing. The construction management plan can help document the phasing of construction activity, what is being built where, and it can also help you document how you're going to notify the public and abutting property owners of what the contractor is building. So really the keys are just ensuring quality. A lot of projects have a consulting firm that's used for construction engineering and inspection, but there are also a number of different agency inspectors who are really making sure that the contractor is doing the right thing and building the project according to the plans and specifications. So those are some very important tips for making sure that the project is built right. And then assessment. So after the project is completed, usually at the end of the project, there's a walkthrough. You have to do a punch list items check with the contractor to make sure that there aren't any outstanding things that they have omitted or haven't done right. The MassDOT guide has provisions for constituent review. You can talk about lessons learned, what went right, what went wrong for the project, and you might be able to apply some of those lessons further down the road. So my final slide is what's new since 2006. There's a whole host of resources available to you to help you solve bicycle and pedestrian design challenges. So on the bicycling side, MassDOT has published the separated bike lane design guide. They have new municipal resource guides on walkability and bikeability. Those guides are very helpful and very wide-ranging in terms of the tips and advice they offer to building pedestrian and bicycle facilities. The AASHTO guide for the development of bike facilities, the last one was done several years ago. My firm is working on the next one. It'll be approved in 2020. The NACTO Urban Bikeway Design Guide, the NACTO Urban Street Design Guide have both been endorsed by MassDOT. So those are great tools to use for innovative and separated bike facilities that really cater to the vulnerable users you want to see out riding a bike, that really cater to kids using a bike to get to where they need to go. And then a whole host of other guides that I could talk about more, but my time is nearly up. So with that in mind, I will end my presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay. So thank you, Jeff. Up next, we have Sergeant Ed Berman of the Ashland Police Department. Prior to his time in Ashland, Sergeant Berman spent 20 years with the Framingham Police Department. Among his many duties and accomplishments, Sergeant Berman implemented and served on the Traffic Safety Committee here in Ashland. Sergeant Berman is here to show us real-world examples of how a safety issue within the built environment was brought to light and the steps that he took to enable a solution to the problem. And before I bring him up, I do want to talk about lunch, because in the back we've been wrestling around with lunch. So after Sergeant Berman talks, we're going to go outside and actually look at the work that was done outside. When we come back in, we're going to take you through the lunch line. And anyone who had a food allergy, we've separated your food. So if you did indicate something, we have a separate area with your food. So with that, I will introduce Sergeant Berman. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I speak loud. You can hear me. So just a little bit about my background. Again, I was with the Framingham Police Department for 20 years. Almost 15 of that, I was the assistant safety officer. So I was responsible for school bus routes, school buses, walking routes for schools every year. The 19 crossing guards reported to me. And I've been in Ashland for the last 5 years, and I've kind of inherited a lot of that also. School buses seem to follow me all over the Commonwealth. So a couple of things. One of the things I noticed when I had come to Ashland was that there was no rhyme or reason on where a bus stop was, how kids walked to school, how if a resident requested a sign to be put up, a speed limit sign, a blind driveway sign, an issue with the crosswalk. It was like the craziest thing I had ever seen. Some people would call the police department. Some people would call DPW. Some people would call the town manager's office. Some people would call the librarian. So I'm not kidding you. But then guess what happened? Nothing ever got done. And I'm sure you have the same things in your community. So what I did was I put a proposal together, and I would highly recommend this for everybody in all the cities and towns that are here. I went in front of my board of selectmen and I created the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee. Okay? It's made up of myself, the fire chief, the DPW director, our engineer, our planner, 2 residents, and 1 person from our board of selectmen. Any traffic concerns that get mentioned to any other department, they have to refer that person to the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee. Everything comes to one place. I have an email, the residents send in their complaints. I don't like this, I don't like that, let's change this, there's too many accidents here, whatever. We meet quarterly. They're open meetings. So if you as a resident or a business owner send me something that you want done at the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee, I actually email you back and say, hey, if you want to attend the meeting, it's at such and such a date, if you want to tell us what your issue is. Now, as you all know, what's our biggest complaint we get? Speeding, right? People are speeding in my neighborhood, right? Well, I've dropped that has dropped to almost 10% of my problems now, because what we did was we purchased a stealth radar unit. Does anybody know what that is? So we have a little box, right? So John Jones says, they're speeding up and down my street every day. Okay, I go out and put the black box on a telephone pole. I leave it out there for 7 days, and I actually send that resident the actual data. How many cars are going up and down the street, the 85th percentile for speed, and I talk to them about, okay, it's your perception, it's a narrow road, and again, periodically I do find an issue, but it gives me the data to work with. We just don't throw up signs because someone says that you're speeding down my street. Now, one of the other things that we did in Ashland when I came here was I noticed we had a walk signal problem with our kids walking to school across some of our streets. They were set up so that, the kids would get a walk signal, but some people still may make a left-hand turn, things like that. I had all of them reprogrammed, so if someone hits a walk signal, it's red in all directions. Okay? It was very easy to do. Now, whenever our walk signals are on at all of our locations, it's red in every direction. All right? Easy fix. So now let's talk about the library. So out front, did a lot of you park across the street? So that was one of the first things that came in front of the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee. Who, I guess, prior to me getting here, for 20 years, people were saying they were almost killed in the crosswalk. There were quite a few near misses. In front of the library, there used to be 4 parking spaces, so 2 on each side of the crosswalk. Well, the first complaint was, we're going to get killed. Fine, okay, whatever. We go out there, and I'm like, wow, they're actually telling the truth. People are flying down this street. And now we have pedestrians with little kids walking in between cars to get to the crosswalk. So the first thing the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee did was this. We removed the 2 spaces on each side of the crosswalk. Well, everything seemed great for a few days until the first SUV parked in the other spot. Same scenario. So now we've got to get rid of 2 more parking spaces. Wow, that was, you would thought I cut off somebody's arm because I removed parking spaces. So we got rid of the parking spaces and things were better, but not great. Because guess what? Look at this time of year. It's dark at 4:30. The library's open till 8 o'clock at night. The majority of our parking is across the street. So now I said, we've got to get those flashing signals in, right? Well, I went to the town hall and asked for $6,000. Wow. So what we did, we came up with a plan because my committee, at first, we didn't have a budget. Okay, we were basically, okay, so I kind of waited till the end of the fiscal, hey, there's some money left over here, can we put those signals in? And that's how we did it. In our next budget cycle, the plan is for my committee to be funded with like a small amount of money to do certain little things, like $25,000 to start. And then the bigger projects that we're looking at, for example, there's 2 intersections that I want to signalize. So I'm going to need a few $100,000 for that. But those are some of the, so my committee, we work on things from adding a blind driveway sign to major intersections. And every time we have a meeting, I bring all the data for the rest of the committee. I bring accident data, we do the stealth radar. So everybody's educated and we come up as a team, we come up with ideas and suggestions. Questions so far? Yeah. Oh, wow. Go ahead.
What was the cost of the stealth radar?
I think it's about $1,500. It's cheap money. And I have a laptop. I go out. It works on Bluetooth. I can pull the data live if I want. It's the greatest little thing you've ever seen. Yes.
So you use the 85%
For speed.
Okay, so that means the 15% of the people can be flying down the street.
Correct.
How do you control that?
You can't. And I tell people that. So a great example. This is what I do. I'll tell them, we'll do speed enforcement on your street. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you what happened last week. Mr. Jones, I won't give you the street, on Brown Street, calls me screaming like a raving lunatic. And I'm sure you've all dealt with them, right? You people do nothing, I pay your salary, I got the whole bit, right? So I decided the next one, fine, I got some time in the morning, I'll go out and do some radar. Who was the first person I stopped? Mr. Brown, or whatever I named him, right? Honest to God, I'm not kidding you. I was like, didn't I just talk to you on the phone yesterday? Well, what do you mean? I said, you told me people, so it's you. So, no, but you know what? And this is the way, when people call me and explain about the speed, I tell them, look, this is a problem in our entire country. This is the way I explain it to them. You are never going to be able to fix this problem ever. And I explain to people, the reason we go with the 85th percentile is this. You have to account for those vehicles that are going slower on your road every day, especially with the stealth radar. You've got the mailman, the UPS guy, different things like that. You're always going to have those people that are going fast. There's nothing we can do. Now, some people ask us, well, can you put that speed trailer up? Fine, I'll put the speed trailer up, but it only works when it's there. Once you take it away, it's gone. Now, we do try to do enforcement, as much as we can, but people don't want a ticket. And then, think about it. I mean, we do go out there and do a lot of that. You can't fix it 100%. We've looked at traffic calming measures. Did I tell you something we did? So I'll tell you. So you guys, you know how you can't use stop signs for speed control, right? You can't use, right? The law says you can't do it. But we have a street in Ashland that, there's a new development that got put in Hopkinton. And this little tiny country road has become the major cut through over to our train station. Okay? So, luckily, since that's happened, well, not luckily, but it worked in my favor, we've had some accidents on that street that we've never had before. So what I did was I created 2 3-way stops, but not for traffic, not for speed, safety. There. So what I did, again, my roadway traffic safety committee, we went in front of the Board of Selectmen, presented the problem so I could get permission to add those stop signs onto that street. We started it as a 6-month trial, and it has been named permanent because the residents absolutely love it, and it has reduced the amount of cars cutting through because they don't want to stop anymore. Now, I will tell you, I always do a stealth study prior to a roadway change, and then I do a stealth study after so I can see the difference. it actually has reduced the speed on this street by 20%. All right, so again, we tried different things. We looked at, anybody here from Westwood? Anybody? We looked at Westwood. I don't know if anybody's seen what Westwood's done. They've created these traffic islands in the middle of the road. We kind of make, but again, they're very expensive, money we don't have. About $25,000 to do one of those. We're not going to do speed humps because it's going to screw up our plows and the streets won't get plowed right and everything else. And the people that live near them complain that the truck's banging. Everything you do, you got to kind of figure out, okay, who's going to complain next from what you did. Sorry, another question. Did that answer your question? You can't fix everything. You can't, but sometimes if you just listen to people, that they're like, okay, I get it. Yes.
How do you balance this, the 85th percentile, with some of the smaller local roads that were really designed for cars to be going at much lower speeds? And I understand perception sometimes is, but then again, perception sometimes rules the activity of the pedestrians and cyclists.
So that's a good, that's a great, so Cedar Street in our town. So Cedar Street, very narrow road, the telephone poles, when people say the pole jumped out in front of me, they're actually in the road, the telephone poles along the way. Very narrow road. The speed limit was 30 miles an hour. We were getting multiple complaints all the time. On the 85th percentile for speed on the road was 42. And we've had fatalities on that road. We've had everything on that road. Very narrow and windy. And then the deers are everywhere too, crossing in front of you. So what we did was we took advantage of the new law. We reduced the speed limit to 25. But what we did was we actually posted that 25 miles an hour sign in multiple locations along the stretch. That did initially reduce our 85th percentile from 42 to 38. Okay? So a little bit better. But what's interesting is since we did the speed limit reduction just about a year ago, we've had 0 accidents. Now, they're still kind of moving along, but we've also been doing heavy traffic enforcement on that street. Now, the residents that were complaining that we weren't doing anything, I'll be honest with you, they're still complaining. Because, I said, I don't know what else I can do. We've done everything under the law that we can do. And I think a lot of the residents, they'll tell you that, and one of the things I always tell the residents too, and because of the way our brains work, think of the road. Someone doing 35 on Cedar Street, that narrow street, it's going to appear they're going a lot faster than they actually are. Than if they're on Route 9 doing 35, they're crawling. And sometimes when I explain that, and I think as long as they see us out there, they're like, okay, they're trying, But our complaints have dropped from when I got here, it felt like 100 a week. I get maybe 1 a week now. So it's the chapter 193, 194, I think it is. Yeah. Did you say that wrong?
It's chapter 90, section 17.
So what that allows you, so your board of selectmen have to adopt the chapter and section. It allows you to change a thickly settled area from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. Now, you have to adopt the law in one of 2 ways. Number 1, you have to make all of your thickly settled streets 25, or you can pick a street by street basis. That's what we chose because we have some streets that are 30. If we made the main roads, if we made them 25, it would create gridlock. So yes, and it's very easy to do. Now it also creates safety zones. That law also creates safety zones. So near your parks, different things, certain distance between parks, you can reduce those streets to 20 miles an hour. Now, I do recommend if you're going to do that, that you would post post the 25 miles an hour. The law doesn't say you actually have to post signs. If you see the city of Boston, they made the entire city 25 miles an hour, but it's literally when you drive into the city, it just says the speed limit in the entire city is 25 miles an hour.
If you do the whole town, your city, you have to post it.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to do. Okay. Yeah. We didn't do that.
But then are you allowed to post individual streets without further studies?
Yes, you can. Yes, absolutely. You can do all your thickly settled streets and make them 25. Yes. It would have been right, and we had to go through DOT in the past, and right now we. Yeah. Yeah. So it's easy.
It does exclude roads that already have.
Yes. Yeah. Like a Route 9 or things like that. Yeah. But for our like we did that on, like I said, we did that on Cedar Street. We were 30, thickly settled. We just dropped, and then we added speed limit signs all along the way. Yes.
Did you have 30 posted on that?
We only had 30 at the beginning of the street and the end of the street.
So you could take them
We just changed them out. We just changed the 30 to 25, and then we added additional in between.
Safety zones to drop it down to 20. Engineering study done on the side because again from speaking with some of the people at Mass DOT, you don't want to artificially drop the speed limit too low. So maybe 85% like up around 29, 30 miles an hour. If you don't like this lower sign, it's not going to do any good. Bring it down to 20. So you want to look at it maybe if they're like around 25 mile an hour range, probably 20. Suppose you have to have that one mile somewhere back up to get it to drop to 20.
That engineering study doesn't have to use like a formal method to get a recommendation.
Yeah, same thing. Like but you're not supposed to use tubes or boxes.
Right.
But
And if anyone, let me give everybody my email, because if you want, I'll share one of my stealth studies for you to look at the data, just so you can kind of see what it will give you, if it's something you're interested in doing. So my email is eBurman, so it's EBURMAN at ashlandpd.org. Sure.
Yeah, if we could. If you want to take a break, or if you want to go out with Sergeant Herman, he's going to show you what he was actually talking about. And then when you come back inside, or if you're not going to go out with him, you should go to the one line. Yeah, let's go.
And just one more thing, everybody, I highly recommend that within your police department, you got to find a person like me that likes this stuff, and because even I'll give you a good example. Yesterday, I actually changed the school bus route because I didn't like where some of the stuff we fixed an issue. I saw it. I'm like, someone's going to get killed here. So I rerouted the school bus route.
That was my question for you about schools. They're not on your group, and you talked about buses.
Well, they are on our group and they're not. My citizen person is my transportation coordinator, but she works for the bus company. But she lives in Ashland, so she's my citizen.
Would be the point person in the school district. So in my district, for example, if the assistant superintendent is the finance, is in control of transportation, or it can be the transportation manager or and another point has, so because these committees are mostly staff, you mentioned that it's open to the public, but it does not have to follow open meeting law. Yay. So that's a very important point. So because it's staff, you don't have to follow open meeting law.
And just one other thing, everyone, if you check the Ashland Mass website, it's ashlandmass.com, under boards and committees, you will see the roadway traffic safety committee, and all my meeting minutes are in there. If you want to see some of the things that we've done, we post it. We're an open book.
Just say thank you to Sergeant Herman. So a great participant. Law enforcement is such a fantastic partner to Safe Routes, and I would encourage you in your communities to make sure that they are working with your Safe Routes program. So with that, let's go and follow Sergeant Herman outside. Mascot. In addition to overseeing the Safe Routes to School program for Mascot, Cassandra works in the multimodal planning group in Mascot's Office of Transportation Planning. She manages several ongoing transportation studies as well as provides technical advice for regional MPO studies and statewide development projects. Today, Cassandra is here to discuss the different sources of funding at the federal and state level for infrastructure, as well as the details of the new Safe Routes to School infrastructure process. Welcome.
Thank you. I always say nobody's face should ever be that large. No one should ever have to see their face that big.
Just
use
the mouse.
Great. So I want to talk to you guys today about what hopefully you're all most excited to hear about is the launch of our new infrastructure funding program, what it is, how to apply. Okay. So Safe Routes to School offers two ways to fund Safe Routes to School projects, Signs and Lines, and then the traditional infrastructure funding program. I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to have my slides for me here. So Signs and Lines is for much smaller projects. We're talking $10,000 and less. So basically, as you can imagine, helping to eliminate really small barriers of walking and biking, maybe just a simple crosswalk, a pedestrian yield sign, something like that. This is a pilot program. This is something that we only just started this past year. We're very excited about it. We are doing our pilot in the city of Lawrence. We are kind of working out our MOU right now. So since it is a pilot, it's we're kind of just getting on our feet and getting started. We're pretty excited about it though, and we have the ability to do it in other towns as well. This is a more informal application process given that it's a pilot, so I don't have a ton of step-by-step instructions on how to apply, but if your town's interested or your school's interested, you can reach out to us. We'll get you planned in the right direction. Something to note here is that the municipality would be the proponent here, which is a little different from the actual infrastructure funding program, which we'll get into now. So this is for larger projects. We're talking $100,000 to about $1 million. So this is for things like sidewalk improvements, traffic calming, crossing improvements, on and off street, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, traffic diversion, things like that. So we've had this funding source before in the past, but it's been on paper and it was quite different. So what's exciting about this new application period coming up is that it's all online. Like we talked about this morning, it's using the Massachusetts Project Intake Tool, which is great. Even if that program looked confusing, trust me, it's really not. And it streamlines and simplifies everything for the applicant and for their reviewer. So something important to remember here is that the applicant is actually the school, which is different from Signs and Lines and different from the standard way that you would apply for projects. And what you're seeing on the bottom here is a great example of the Safe Routes project, a little bit of a sidewalk and roadway reconstruction. This is pretty wide, maybe people are going pretty fast. So to bump it out like that, you're definitely going to slow traffic down, and it also looks a lot nicer. Perception's a big thing, and safety looks a lot safer, and I would imagine that it probably is. There we go. So as I mentioned, the school is the proponent here. However, we also require coordination of municipalities through a municipal co-applicant. So in the past, we've had a little bit of an issue where we select schools based on the prior method, which was through this walking assessment, which you may or may not be familiar with. And we get, further down the road in designing, and the town would, or someone like the mayor's office, someone would be like, we do not want this. Why is this here? This cannot move forward. So we've wasted time, effort, money on this design that now for a project that's not going to move forward. So we wanted to make sure we had this municipal co-applicant in here to require that coordination so that somebody with decision-making power is on board with this project. And we can provide a little bit of guidance on who might be the right actual contact person for this co-applicant. So our first application period with this new application is supposed to be opening at the end of the month. We're very excited about it.
So this will be the first solicitation in a couple of years now. We're just finishing up projects that were approved and programmed years ago. So this new round is a pretty exciting moment for us. Applications will be accepted for 45 days after open. So if we open at the end of the month, we're talking just since the new year. You're seeing another good before and after of a sidewalk reconstruction here. Okay, so once that application period closes, I'm going to get a little bit more into the process here. Submissions will be reviewed by the project selection committee, which is comprised of 6 different mass staff and office staff, myself included. Projects will be selected based on predetermined scoring criteria and then some discussion after that. How many projects we will choose is a question that I can't really answer right now. We haven't decided our budget for Safer's projects yet, so depending on if we're setting aside 5 million, 8 million, that will determine how many projects we can select. But the selected projects will be advanced to complete the project need form and the project initiation form, which you heard about this morning, just like any other project. Except for now, things are going back to the municipality like any other project. So now your municipality is kind of taking over just like they normally would, where the school was the one filling out that Safe Routes to School application on MAPIT. There's a key distinction there. But while the municipality is in charge of the PNF and PIF, we have our own consultants on board ready and waiting to help fill out this as needed. So we didn't want this to be a heavy lift for anyone. We wanted this to be a great opportunity, not something that's going to be difficult. So we have put all the support in place necessary to just hopefully make this really smooth. And the projects are presented to the project review committee. We talked about this a little this morning. So this is something that all projects will be, go through, whether it's Safe Routes or just any other project. After they've gone through the project initiation form, they get, typically, projects would be scored by what we call the pre-project review committee, and they would either be advanced or not advanced. And then at the regular project review committee, they would be scored and prioritized and chosen based on that. So something important to note here is that the Safe Routes projects do not have to compete with other projects here. So if you are selected to fill out the PNF and PIF, your project has been funded and it has been awarded and it will go on. We just have to continue with the formality that is required of all typical projects. Okay, and so I can get into more of this later, but so after the project review committee approves and the project moves forward into the state transportation improvement plan. Okay, and so I know this is a lot of information, so I want to just preface this with the fact that I have made a very thorough and comprehensive application guidance document, step by step, that will help everyone. I think Diane might pass it out shortly. She might wait so people pay attention to me a little longer, which I would appreciate. So to just get a little bit more of the nitty gritty, we had someone ask earlier, say, well, do you need an account to go into MAPIT? The answer to that question is yes, you do need an account. So you have to request a Geodot account. When I'm saying you, I'm intending that you to be the school, since the school is the applicant. You would go to this website here, which again is in the application document, so guidance documents, so don't feel like you need to write it down. But it's here. You're going to request an account. People in our GIS group in our office will hook you up in a few days. You'll be sent an email. Finalize your account, validate your email, and whatnot. And then you can go onto the actual MAPIT application. And so it's going to look the same as what you saw this morning. It's the same exact workflow. You still do that sketching and the geoprocessing that we talked about with all the layers that people were pretty interested in that could be highlighted. Then after that, you get to the Safe Routes to School application, which is all of the Safe Routes to School questions. Okay, and so then after that, you would submit it. And if you are approved by the Safe Routes to School Project Selection Committee, your municipality would be notified and invited to fill out the PNF and then the PIF after that. Okay, like I said, we have a document. I think it can come around now. I know it's a lot of information. Do you have questions? I hope. Yeah.
The municipal co-op already has
yes. They should create their own account just for the sake of not password sharing between the town and the school. But also, since the school is one who's supposed to be filling it out, it makes sense that the account information is theirs.
Can the municipal co-applicant be like a volunteer committee, like the trail committee?
No, so the municipal co-applicant should be someone with a decision-making authority in the town. However, I will say that committees like that are important because in the application, we have a section where you should be listing support from committees like that, assuming you have the support. If you don't, that's okay, but if you do, you should put it in there. But that's an important distinction, thank you.
Like a town planner.
Yeah. Yeah, but you would just want like any, town planner, you would want it to be someone who is allowed to make those kinds of decisions. Yeah, and I'll actually be contacting all of those contacts, so if they're not legit, I'll know. And Beth.
Now, schools pretty much have to know the project is like.
Exactly, yeah, that's not necessary. So the way it was done in the past was that you would you'd be requesting a walking assessment, we'd come out and, someone, not me, I wasn't here, I was probably in high school, would walk around, do the walking assessment, and then we take a project. So this is different. We don't have to do that walking assessment. The school says, we have this project in mind, or maybe the town has the project in mind and they approach the school, and it's a partnership, which is great. And then you do it that way. So you have to have a project in mind. You don't have to have it designed. You just have to have an idea. Other questions? Yep.
So, favorite partners
Correct.
very active in the days.
Mm-hmm.
Less so, or it fluctuates.
Yep.
Does that play into the application process at all?
It plays into the scoring. So we have an opportunity for our partners who are very active and have been partners for a long time to receive a few more points, which is helpful.
And is that scoring process laid out in the application?
Yep, it's summarized in the guidance document.
Your town currently has a project in the pipeline for the previous assessment. Would you still be considered in this one?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be part of the discussion. We like to be very equitable in how we distribute projects. But there's no reason that you couldn't apply anyway. It just might be a part of the discussion later on, but it's a great project. Maybe we want to do it anyway. Yeah.
I was looking at the data you've had here on the past 12 years. It looks like you're planning about 2-3 projects a year. Is that moving forward?
Yeah, that's probably about accurate. Any other questions? We'll do that, good.
I know that it's still in the pilot stage, but for the signs and lines, do you have any sense of the scope of that compared to essentially both projects? Like, if you do so many more at the $10,000 level?
Well, we just have less money for it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I guess that was my question. Do you have a sense of how much of your budget? Or is that
No, we have a number. We can do about 5, and we're doing 1 right now. Yeah, does that make sense? Did that answer your question? It's a small
Not so
number.
hopeful, yeah.
I know.
It would be nice to say, at that budget level, you could do 10 or 15.
Yeah.
Especially with less planning.
Definitely, and that's something we hope to do in the future. We don't have a ton of money set aside for it now because we haven't done it yet. We don't know how easy or even effective it'll be. So in future contract years, we can up it if we want to.
Well, here's a vote. One vote.
Yeah, my vote too. I vote for it as well. Any other questions?
Seems like on the school side, if they're making and getting that geodata count, that you want somebody who has technical experience to navigate that system.
So MapIt's not incredibly technical, to be honest with you. And that guidance document does have step 1, write your name, step 2, like it's really helpful. But if I go back a little, you just don't have to go so much. But I mean, it's just asking like project name, you click and type, proponent, click and type. The sketching and the geoprocessing that we were talking a lot about this morning, they're actually not complicated. So when we were processing those layers for the Safewords application, all you do is hit run geoprocessing, and it grabs those layers that intersect for you. You don't have to search for them. You don't have to make sure the right ones are checked. It grabs them for you. And for when you're sketching the project limits, it's just like using the paint tool on your computer to draw a polygon. It's very easy. But I mean, at the same time, if people have problems, they should definitely reach out to us. We have a whole team waiting and ready to help. Yes? That is a great question. I thought I had a slide on this. Is it not in it? Yes. Yeah, so I do have a timeline, and I just realized I got ahead of myself and didn't talk about who's eligible, which I think we should all have a firm grasp on. But for timeline, so we are having schools apply in January, December. We're talking project selection committee review in early 2019. I'm hesitant to say like we'll do it in January in case it happens in February. And then funds will be awarded right around that time. It shouldn't take too much longer after. And then in spring 2019, we'll be having the municipalities complete the PNF and the PIF. And the goal is to bring these for final approval to the project review committee at their summer meeting, which is usually June or July. And then right after that, they would be given a project number, like we talked about this morning, and be programmed for design and construction. Fun fact about Safe Routes to School, which is different from other projects, is that design's included in the grant, okay? So a lot of projects, you have to pay the design and match that, or some funding will pay for the construction, but design and construction is included here. So let's go into eligibility. I almost forgot about this. Schools have to have partnered with the Safe Routes to School program for at least 6 months before applying. We just kind of touched on this. So it is important to have a demonstrated commitment to the Safe Routes program. We don't just want to lock down an improvement in an area where they're only using the engineering E. We want them to be utilizing all the E's. Projects must be within 2 miles of a school. Of course, you need to catch that walk and bike shed of your students. Projects must be for K through 8 students. So a 9 through 12 school is not going to be eligible. 8 through 12, sure, that's fine. But projects must be for a school that has at least one grade K through 8. And public and charter schools are eligible. So any school receiving public funding is eligible. Yes.
If you missed this current round with the application opening soon, and
Yeah.
decisions maybe be made this summer, will this be an annual thing, or are we anticipating a year from now?
We hope so. Yeah, we hope so. Yep.
So that I kind of score sheet you handed out, that's 16 points from the score for this.
So that would be your partner level that we were mentioning, whether you're very active, how long you've been a partner, things like that. That's not defined in that document. Yes, it is, and we have our own internal score sheet. We debated back and forth with sharing the entire detailed document. It's probably something that will get added at some point. Just have to talk to the people who pay me if that's okay.
I'm just thinking if you have a school that's interested and they're really high, you might be more encouraging them to participate in the program. Oh, you might say, well, that seems to be
Sure, I understand that. I definitely wouldn't want someone to not apply because we don't think they're involved enough, though, at the same time. I wouldn't want to preclude anyone from that.
Similar to MassDOT's Complete Streets funding, are there any restrictions related to using this funding on state roadways, which is not allowed?
Right, no, that's okay. That's okay for Safe Routes. Yep. Yep, so this is a question I've actually got a couple times, so I double checked it with our project management division, and that's okay. Yep.
The school's going to be the one submitting. Person has access to the mapping tool, probably going to be if I partner with the person at the school, the facilities manager, they don't need for anything, I can know that we have listed them as a proponent, I guess. Is that how we do it?
You know, we just had a question about that, and I'm thinking that the school should have their own account. And what I would recommend if you wanted to help them was just that maybe like a 1-hour meeting where you guys do it together. Okay. This is all new, so this is what we have decided to do this year, but it's great to hear these kind of questions and feedback, and we'll see how things go. And if we want to revise it, we can. Yep.
I would suggest one areas that in some cases there may be someone like a school, someone in the school district instead of a specific school. I mean, you should go with the specific school, but again, then you get consistency across. They'll be encouraging consistency across the
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Any other? Yeah.
I'm sorry, you had mentioned earlier that you're trying to avoid the hiccups of not enough public engagement, didn't have a finding necessarily. Does the scoring take that into consideration as well? In other words,
Yes. Yes, so there is an opportunity to get a higher score if you were able to demonstrate community support in the form of maybe a town or city plan that has goals that this project supports, or it has listed this specific project as a priority, or if you've got committees, advocacy groups that are in support of the community, you should include them there as well. Mm-hmm.
Does this sort of take into account rural and urban?
It does not score based on urban or rural. We take into account like population, how many kids this will be affected or affecting, but we don't score on that. It's more of a discussion topic. Thanks. Yes.
So most of the questions that I'm thinking the city is the school principal or the school administration?
It could be the principal, administration, PTO. Yeah.
PTO?
That would be okay. Oh, sorry, no PTO. Do you have bad experiences with that? Okay, no PTO. I'll tell my team, no PTO.
And then like how are the eligible schools gonna know online or
They'll get an email. Yep, they'll get an email inviting them to apply, and it will have that guidance document attached to it. Our MPOs are also getting notification. I spend all of October, almost every single day, going out to different MPOs, transportation managers, groups, Bay State Roads, telling people about this. So everyone knows it's coming, but we'll send out that final email push when it's actually out. Okay, so let's talk about examples of eligible projects, okay? So sidewalk improvements, traffic calming, speed reduction, improvements, pedestrian and bicycle crossing improvements, on-street bicycle facilities, off-street bicycle and pedestrian facilities, secure bicycle parking facilities, traffic diversion improvements. This is probably things that you guys already kind of had in mind. But some of the things that are not eligible are very important to point out as well. So recurring costs are not eligible. So your salary for a crossing guard, not eligible here. And now we're talking about infrastructure. So that kind of does make sense. Pavement maintenance, not eligible. Vehicle lane travel improvements. This is geared towards walking and biking for kids. So this is not going to be eligible. School bus improvement projects, not eligible for the same reason. Portable enforcement equipment, yeah, exactly. Yeah, not going to be eligible under the infrastructure funding program. And then gifts, like those wristbands on your tables, things like that, not eligible under this program. Any questions on that? Yes.
Well, if your traffic calming measure changing the dimensions of a roadway.
That's okay.
If it impacts the existing drainage, you have to do drainage improvements.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, are those included?
Yep, and those would be included in your cost estimate. So in the application, you are asked to estimate your costs. Now, a lot of school administration are not engineers. They're not going to know how much it's going to cost. We have a cost estimate guide in the application document that should guide people towards whether it's a small project, maybe around 100,000, or medium into large around $1 million. Any other questions?
Do you have a similar list for signs and lines?
We do not. Signs and lines is briefly mentioned in this guidance document. The guidance document is geared towards the infrastructure funding program. I think that signs and lines is something that Diane and I are still kind of developing. Any other questions? Yes. For a school.
Okay.
Yep. Any questions? Yes.
So on your question, one school in the district is committed, has done the program for 6 months, but your improvements are needed at another school, they can't.
That would be a no-go. Correct. You're correct. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not done yet. So even though, this is our safe routes email, by the way. If you have specific questions or like school-specific questions, feel free to reach out. I'll get back to you, or someone from Dan's team will get back to you. But since there's a lot of projects that go on that maybe need other funding or are not safe versus school eligible, since I have this great audience here, I wanted to just talk about other funding opportunities for municipal projects. Okay, so there's many ways to fund projects, we all know this, but the appropriate source depends on the project itself. And all of these projects are programmed by metropolitan planning organizations, so I want to talk a bit about them because they're very important and helpful to understand in the project development process. So MPOs are federally required in urbanized areas with more than 50,000 people. So if a urbanized area wants to receive federal funding for transportation, they have to develop an MPO, which we've done in Massachusetts. So let's start from the top here. The U.S. Department of Transportation provides us all this money to each state, and not just money, but regulation, guidance, oversight, goals, priorities, things like that. And then MassDOT provides funding match for that federal aid, and then has their own regulations, policies, priorities, goals, and oversight. And then that money gets funneled into our different MPOs across the state, who plan and program that money through their long-range plan, their Unified Planning Work Program, their Transportation Improvement Program. Transportation Improvement Program being the one that you heard a bit about today, where we actually program the projects for design and construction. So we have 13 MPOs in Massachusetts. The only caveat to that is that the 3 in black are MPOs that actually don't have 50,000 people in their organized areas. That's okay, we include them anyway. So this is the transportation policy and decision-making body for each region, composed of local and state officials. And every year they get together and they decide on transportation system investments using their allocation of federal funds. And they put it into this transportation improvement plan, which I'm going to call a TIP. It's just so much easier. And it is for a 5-year period, but it's updated every year. Okay. So this TIP is federally required and for a 5-year span, and it lists all of the projects that are federally funded, so any project that uses federal funds. And TIPs are multimodal, meaning that they include projects for roadways, bicycles, pedestrians, transit projects, things like that. And like everything in this life, funding is limited. So communities have to advance projects for consideration. So you've got, like you see here, all these projects that get applied for, or your PNF maybe even, go into this box where we consider MPO goals, selection criteria, our funding rules and constraints, and then the projects that we're able to select from that become the tip of that MPO. Mind you, for safe routes, you're not competing with other projects. You're only competing with other safe routes to school projects. Important distinction there. Safe routes is great in that sense. All right, and then the tip for each MPO gets rolled up into this statewide state transportation improvement program called the SKIP that MassDOT puts together. So you've got all these projects, all these tips from every MPO. They're just rolled up into one plan, okay? And that is the state plan. So it's a combination of all of the prioritized investment programs and MassDOT's prioritized investments as well. All right, well, let's think about the project process a little bit. We talked about this a lot this morning, but I'm just going to give an overview because it's really helpful. The project proponent for most projects, for say, it would be the school, but for most project proponents would be the municipality. You identify your project need. MPOs can be involved in this, towns can be involved with this by identifying a need in a local planning study or a local plan. From your project need, you fill out your project need form on MAPIT. It goes to the MassDOT district office for review and guidance in project planning. The MPO can also help here. See, the MPO is very involved in the project development process, so it's very helpful to understand how they're involved. And then you move on to the project initiation stage where you're filling out that project initiation form, again on MAPIT. And then you move to design and permitting if you make it that far. So step 3 is where you go to the project review committee where your projects would be scored, prioritized, and ultimately the ones that are going to move on will be selected. Again, safe routes. Any safe routes projects that make it to this stage, they're going to make it all the way. We are kind of doing our own project review committee. This is more of a formality for us to have to go through this. Any other project, though, is then going to move through design and permitting through the highway division. Again, MPO assistance there. They're kind of that really helpful local liaison that we really depend on and have a close relationship with. And we find funding, so this goes back into developing the transportation improvement program and the state transportation improvement program, okay? And then we go into construction. You're actually having your shovel in the ground. Now, all of this can take years. We talked about that this morning. It's important to know. It's important to keep in mind. We got to keep fighting the good fight. Just a few years. All right, and this is a really helpful table that I wanted to share with you guys. I know it's hard to read, but that's okay because you can find it online. If you just Google pedestrian and bicycle funding opportunities, you will be directed. The first link will take you to the FHWA website that provides this great table on all kinds of pedestrian and bicycle funding opportunities at the federal level. And so depending on your project activity types, for example, like bicycle lanes on a road, it'll tell you, well, you can get a build grant, you can use CMAQ money, you can use, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program money. You can use Transportation Alternatives Program money, which is where Safe Routes actually comes from. Safe Routes money is Transportation Alternative Program money. And this is just a great start where if you know you have a project in mind, look at your project elements and think where maybe might we be able to get money from that. And so a lot of this money, being federal, goes to your MPO. That's why it's important to understand how MPOs work. And again, if you Google pedestrian and bicycle funding opportunities, it's one of the first things from FHWA that comes up. Really great resource. The last thing I want to talk about, we mentioned it briefly this morning, is a really great program that MassDOT has called the Complete Streets Program. This is not in my office. I don't have anything to do with it, but I wanted to share with you guys because I think it's a great option. So we all know what a complete street is. I would think it provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, so walking, biking, transit, driving, for all people of all ages and abilities. So MassDOT has a program that provides funding for this. So it provides technical assistance, and then it provides actual construction costs, but not design costs. Important distinction there. So just like Safe Routes to School, just like many other funding sources, there are eligibility requirements. The municipality has to have completed Complete Streets training. They have to have adopted a Complete Streets policy and developed a prioritization plan. These are just your basic requirements to be able to use these funds. If you want to learn more about this, jot down this URL or just Google Mass.Complete Streets. The first thing that comes up, there's, just like there is for Safe Routes, a very comprehensive guidance document about the program, what it does, who can use it, what they can use it for, and how to apply. So that is my presentation. Any questions on the second half, not Safe Routes stuff? Yes, Aaron?
Is a Safe Routes project that they have in mind have to be complete, like contextually complete streets?
Yeah, so any project that MassDOT funds would have to abide by that, and like ADA, all those types of things.
So if you're thinking about a project, they need to be built in complete streets, so you need to pay that on this side.
But that's not necessarily true. Yeah, very context sensitive, yes. Yeah. I think I saw a hand over here. Yes.
Random question that came my way this week was about puddles under a road for turtle crossing.
Turtles.
I saw some.
Thought you were going to say for students, but okay.
You mentioned that was part of that sort of funding. How would I go about?
Let me go back.
The regional planning.
So which activity? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, so TAP funds, that's a thing. Yep. Yeah, you could inquire with your MPOs. Yeah, they definitely be able to provide you a little more guidance there. That's probably one of the most unique questions I've ever got. Oh, for turtle crossing. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that gets funneled through MassDOT to the MPOs. Sure.
He also is just one other person that specializes in that sort of thing. He's partnered with someone at MassDOT actually for those types of initiatives. His name is Dean Paulson, and that's one. He's an expert in that stuff.
That's awesome.
I'll tell you more than you need to know.
That's great. That's true. Any other questions? Safe Routes or not? Yes.
So we're being at the same thing. So it's a big check mark of all the schools in our district, partnership with the state.
Thank you.
And in addition, your project are looking at in the traffic tool, would it be apparent if your project was better suited for another funding source?
No, so that's actually not something that you think about when you're doing a project need form. It doesn't ask you, like, let me go back. Yeah, so it's not gonna like ask you what funding source or what program. Like, well, I mean, it is gonna ask you a few different options, and Safe Routes is one of them, but it doesn't say like where will you pull your funding from. So it's like when you hit start here, this little box comes up and it says like there's a few tabs like municipal projects, and then under that is Safe Routes, and then there's like DOT projects, and like under that would be some other things that are not as relevant for Safe Routes, but you wouldn't have to click like I'm submitting a project need form for CMAQ money or anything like that.
You're finding, like, okay, Mass DOT is looking for all of those when it's commercial projects.
For Safe Routes?
Yeah.
Safe Routes, it will have its own, it does have its own set aside from TAP funds, Transportation Alternatives Programs funds. So there's no search needed there. It's just a decision of how much we set aside for it. For Safe Routes or for anything? That's a good question. So the way the workflow of this works, it's not like submit under this, submit under that. It's just submit. It's not like you are yourself picking what funding source you're applying for, if that makes sense. You just submit the form.
If I could add to that, because I actually went through this process on the whole campus, is that so as far as the concerned, the state has to send them the you get the state office schools and but they're all ending up in the country program. So I'm not sure like what is the advantage of one versus the other.
Right.
And all those different funding categories that that happen. It used to be that when we were planning it this week, they had a I think we were called the Marathon Planning, and they had about between $10 and $11 million as far as their allocation. But then that got categorized and subcategorized into somehow some for ACID, and so depending on the kind of project that you were trying to get on, you had to go match it with whatever bucket of funds were available that you were eligible for. But now that we just changed, where instead of that those different funding categories being allocated and then it's allocated at the state level. So now, like, the formula is state level. But as far as that wonderful thing, I mean, ultimately it's a project. So, I would think we would go that we could get more funding. So it really makes sense to go with the state budget. But also, the process is other things really do have a couple of campus. Yeah. Right, you could, but then you could do that, but then you could get
That can be very significant, especially when right of way is involved.
Yes. This is a far less technical question. This is online.
Not yet. It will be online once the application is live. Yes, I was afraid if I put it online, I would get too many emails. Why isn't the application online? It's coming, I promise. Yeah, but it will be. Yeah, consider yourself very lucky. All of this information will be on the engineering page of the website. Yeah. Other questions for me? Yes.
Maybe right away, because you mentioned it.
Yep. Yep, and that can be a significant cost, so that's one thing to keep in mind.
Can I ask along that line? So, like, as far as the tip is concerned, oftentimes projects get thrown. It throws a tip in your jaw, right? As far as the funding is concerned. So, oftentimes projects get derailed because they can't get all the right-of-way acquisitions. So,
that can happen.
That happens with the K-12 program. Like, how is that, like, shifting of the funding?
That would be just like any other project. Yeah. If the right of way gets thrown off, it would throw off the project schedule. Any other questions? How are we doing on time? Am I early?
We're good.
Good. I always talk very fast and finish early.
I appreciate the timelines that you provided that you went through.
Sure.
Through the check through those. Are those based on reality? In other words, the project, the 29 projects, do they closely mirror what you provided for us as examples of timelines that you anticipated in the future?
So, yes. Yep, so the timeline presented this morning is accurate. It can take years to get to the point where you're shoveling the ground, constructing. This timeline we anticipate to be accurate. If anything, the PNF and PIF might get pushed out to the next PRC meeting a few months later. It wouldn't be like you have to wait a year or something. Yeah, I hope this is accurate.
When is this program to
That would be.
Would start with what year?
That's a great question. So that first program year, I believe, would be 2021. And not every project selected in this funding year would be put into 2021. It would be 2022, just like we've done in the past, which is why we have some projects just finishing up now from prior solicitation years. Other questions? Well, if you think of any, you know how to get a hold of us.
Thank you, Cassandra.
You're
This is
welcome.
great. Okay. So thank you, Cassandra, and thank you to all of our speakers today. Hope you found this forum to be really informative. The questions from the audience were fantastic. I really do appreciate all the great interaction and the helpful information from the audience as well. So we do have some evaluation sheets on the table. If you could please fill those out, that would be much appreciated. We do take your feedback very seriously, and we try to apply it to provide the best content we can moving forward. Before we begin, or before we bring this forum to an end, let me get all the way through here. Okay. Before we bring the forum to an end, I'd like to point out some things we have coming up on the Safe Routes calendar. So on February 6th, we have our annual Winter Walk and Roll to School Day. This is one of our flagship days. So we do have 3 days throughout the school year that we do celebrate and encourage schools to get their students walking and biking to work. And because this is Massachusetts, we celebrate the Winter Walk because we don't stop when it snows. And so start looking for communications from us probably in the next couple weeks to start signing up for the Winter Walk. And then in May, we have our Massachusetts Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day. And we also have our Safe Routes to School Awards Ceremony. We're hoping to have it take place in May, late May or early June. And I did go over the yard sign contest. I don't know if any of you have seen, but this will be our 3rd year. We allow students in elementary and middle school, I think, to design yard signs. And I believe this year we're going to focus on anti-idling. So the last couple of years it's been safety. And I looked at the idling signs around schools, and they're kind of boring, right? You know, everybody ignores them, and you still see people queuing and idling. So I thought, let's have the students design something for the arts and contest. So make sure that you get all your schools, and if you have any elementary, middle schoolers, look for correspondence from us after the first of the year. Usually the deadline is around the end of March for that. And any questions on anything we've talked about today? Anything else? Any burning things we haven't addressed? We have plenty of food. I think we can take some. And is the fire department next door? I'm trying to think of where we can deliver some food, but please take some, and we'll get some around the town. And once again, thank you so much for coming to our forum. Safe travels, and appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Okay.